How is it going? We're back for another video. We're going to do the top songs of 1964. Usually I don't go back that far because I start losing the distinction between the years now that we're so far away from it. But 1964 was quite a significant year for a lot of reasons. Mainly, in my view, and a lot of people's view, the Beatles and Beatlemania was sweeping the U.S. They were on Ed Sullivan and dominated the charts that year. But they were not the only ones. They were just leading the pack of the British invasion. It obviously would gain a lot more mainstream in 1965 and 1966 and beyond, with a lot of British bands, the Led Zeppelins and Black Sabbath and all of those things that came in the 70s. But 1964 was like the first year that really was happening. They led the British invasion, but other bands that were right on their coattails in that early form of the British invasion would be like the Rolling Stones, Jerry and the Pacemakers, the Zombies, the Kinks, and surprise to me when I looked it up, the Dave Clark Five. They almost had more songs in the top 100 than the Beatles did. And somehow they just were kind of squashed by the whole Beatles phenomenon. Nobody talks about them anymore. They're just not really a thing anymore, but they had a lot of hits. We'll get to that in a little bit. Another one would be The Who. They didn't quite crack the US that early, but their first single was in 1964. It was I Can't Explain. The rock and roll had been around for almost 10 years at this point. You had your whole Elvis phenomenon and Chuck Berry and Little Richard and all those things. But about 1959, they thought that the fad of rock and roll was over. Elvis was in the army. Jerry Lee Lewis and Chuck Berry both got in trouble for things. And Eddie Cochran died, Gene Vincent died, Buddy Holly and Richie Valens were in that plane crash, and they just thought that was the death knell of rock and roll. But within a couple of years, we had all these British bands that came up through skiffle, and skiffle's kind of like folk music of England. It was easy to play and easy to make instruments that they could play, and they were just street gangs that were forming bands, and that evolved into the early rock and roll. But at the same time as that, you still had, they were kind of taking over the charts from all of the old school crooners and orchestras and stuff. You still had people like Sammy Davis and Dean Martin having hits into that era. And then from America, almost as big as the whole Beatles and British invasion thing, you had the Motown stuff happening, and there was a whole slew of every record label was putting out records by bands that just basically were copycat. I always make the joke whenever I hear anything that sounds like Motown, that if it's a girl, I say it's the Supremes, and if it's a guy, I say it's the Temptations. But there was a whole range of that stuff that I can't tell the difference whether it was actually Motown or one of these copycat things. We also had Dusty Springfield. She was like the British version of some of that R&B and soul stuff. I love Dusty Springfield. She has quite a few songs in the top 100. But she was kind of an anomaly because I never knew until years later that she was British even. And then we had the whole Four Seasons, Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons thing doing their own thing. And they were huge that year. They had way more songs than I even thought that they did until I started doing some research here. And then in their own little corner off to the side from that, you had Bob Dylan and the whole folk movement that was happening. You had people like Paul Simon or Simon and Garfunkel and all that. But Bob Dylan kind of was the link, the middle ground between the beatnik writers of the 40s and 50s and the hippie thing that was going to be coming in a couple of years. A couple of my favorite Bob Dylan songs from that year, I can't even remember. He was pumping out albums every 6 months or so for that first 4 or 5 years, up until I think he had a car or a motorcycle accident in 67, 68. But he was putting out an album every 5 or 6 months for like 6, 7 albums, 8 albums deep there. But the album that was in 1964 that I know of, All Right, It's All Right, Mom, I'm Only Bleeding, and It's All Over Now, Baby Blue, which some of those British bands even covered some of those songs. I think, well, they're not British, but the Turtles had a bigger hit than Bob Dylan, even with a couple of those. Another thing that keeps popping up on some of my research was the Righteous Brothers. Their two big songs, Unchained Melody. I think the guy's name is Bill Medley. So confusing. Unchained Melody and You've Lost That Love and Feeling. But apparently they may have come out in 64, but they were actually big hits in the next year. So that's all I'll talk about them. Some of the other songs that are not on the list that I wanted to mention from 1964 would be The Crying Game, which I became aware of because of Boy George covering it for the movie Crying Game in the 90s. But it was a 1964 hit. I can't even remember who it was by, but... And Go Now was the first Moody Blues single before Justin Hayward was the lead singer. And I didn't know until this year that Denny Lane, who was the number 3 in the Wings during the Band on the Run era, he just passed away last year. He was the lead singer on the original Moody Blues. They had a hit with Go Now. And I never even knew about that song, and I never knew he was a part of that band until this year. Walk On By, that's actually in the list, but that's a great song. That was sampled in a big hit song from this year. Burt Bacharach, who died last year or 2 years ago. One of the greatest American songwriters of all time. Sung by Dionne Warwick. And the last one would be Goldfinger from probably one of the best James Bond movies. Goldfinger, he's the man. Oh, Shirley Bassey is so badass. I love all those old James Bond. Uh-oh, my alarm's going off. I love all those old James Bond themes. I like the theme songs better than I like the movies, actually. So, let's get into the list here. I haven't had any caffeine. I don't know why I'm so fired up today, but... Number 100, The Searchers with Needles and Pins. I know this song. I think somebody covered this at some point. But, Needles and Pins. Number 99, Louie Louie. There's the first incident of some of that Roxas garage band stuff. And I knew that stuff was influential and I knew it was important, but I never knew some of that stuff charted as good as it did. Louie Louie by the Kingsmen was a big deal for they had a FBI file for many years because nobody could understand the lyrics, and they were trying to decipher the lyrics, and they thought the lyrics were trying to incite violence or were vulgar in some way, and I don't know, it's a crazy story. Number 95 is the first Beatles one. I Saw Her Standing There. Typical pop song from that era. Not their best, but strong standing from their early stuff. 93 was called Haunted House, and I think I had a video, VHS of a movie that this song was in. It's kind of a novelty Halloween song, and nobody ever thinks of this song when they're doing their Halloween lists. I forgot to write down who it was by, but look up the song Haunted House for your next Halloween list. There was a few blues-ish, instrumental, bluesy kind of songs from various labels sprinkled through here too. You had in 91 you got the first Dave Clark 5, Do You Love Me? Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you need me? And I always thought that was one of those Motown songs, but I looked it up and apparently it's one of theirs. They were doing that Motown stuff was great for a bunch of young white British guys. Number 90 was Walk Don't Run. 64, apparently the Venture Brothers. That's a TV show. That's a whole nother episode. The Ventures had a hit with this song a few years earlier, or maybe it wasn't a hit. Maybe that's why they re-released it. I'm not sure. But Walk Don't Run is one of the great early instrumental surf rock songs. Probably the pinnacle of that stuff. 89 is the first Jerry and the Pacemakers. I didn't even write the name of the song down because they're not one of my favorites, and that wasn't one I knew. Number 88 was a song called High Heeled Sneakers by Tommy Tucker. And it's significant because it was the last number one song from Chess Records. Number 86, you had the Kingsmen again with Money, a cover of the Barrett Strong song. That one actually is a British cover version of a Motown song. Then you had a couple of Roger Miller songs, like King of the Road and several other Roger Miller songs, but I didn't recognize either one of those, but I thought it was significant that he had like two right there real close together in the top 100. Number 78 is the Kinks, You Really Got Me. And I knew that was from 1964, but I didn't realize it had gotten so big, actually, right out of the gate like that. The Kinks kind of had some trouble. Shoot, I just read an article about what happened, but somehow they were banned or blacklisted from touring America for most of the 60s and 70s. So they would have been way huger if they would have been allowed to come over here and tour and stuff. But something kept them from doing that, and I can't really remember what it was. But next up we got I keep wanting to do, when I see those certain numbers, I want to say 1975. Number 75, we have one of my favorite songs of all time, the Trashmen doing Surfin' Bird. And a lot of people know this song from Peter Griffin doing it on Family Guy. And a lot of people call this song, oh wait. Another fun fact about You Really Got Me is that that's one of the early Jimmy Page riffs. The riff on that is actually Jimmy Page. And I've heard conflicting stories, so that may or may not be true at this point. Depends on what timeline we're living in. But I like to believe that that is Jimmy Page playing the rhythm guitar, because the guy that actually invented hard rock and arguably heavy metal actually played the rhythm guitar on the song that is actually the first punk, or considered the first punk or heavy metal song. So you really got me. 75, we got Surfing Bird by the Trashmen. And a lot of people know this song because of Peter Griffin singing it. It's one of my favorite songs of all time. You wouldn't think that, but it is. A lot of people think it's called Bird is the Word, but it's not. It's actually kind of a mashup of a song called Bird is the Word and Oop Papa Mau Mau, because he does that towards the end of it. And that song had to probably freak people out in 1964, because it's still pretty wild and silly and crazy now. So Surfing Bird, love that song. 73 is a Roy Orbison song that I didn't recognize called It's Over. 71 is a Dionne Warwick song that I didn't know. 70 is The Temptations, the first Motown on the list here. The Way You Do the Things You Do. 68 is the Shangri-La's Leader of the Pack, and it's kind of a novelty song. I forgot what they call those kind of songs. They're like story songs of some sort. Not a huge fan, but I love their other song, but not a big fan of Leader of the Pack. Oh, main lead singer just died this year too. Obviously you can tell I'm obsessed with celebrity deaths, and it's amazing how many of them line up with the years that I'm covering. It's just the synchronicity is blowing me away in some of these videos. That's what's giving me a lot of energy to keep going on a lot of these videos. But 67, another Dave Clark 5. Yeah, some Ricky Nelson. He was still big on Ozzy and Harriet at the time, so he had some little crooner, teeny bopper songs. 64, Just Like Romeo and Juliet. 63 is Because by the Dave Clark 5. And I'd look that one up too, because I thought, almost a pun there, because that sounded so much like a Beatles song. I thought for sure we're covering a Beatles song. Because I love you. 61 is Little Honda. And I didn't write down who that was by, but that's the first of the Beach Boys copycat songs. And you look up Little Honda, play that for somebody, and you could win money if you asked them who that was, because I guarantee you 90% of the people would say that that's the Beach Boys. And there's several of them in the list here, and they're all about cars, and every one of them sounds exactly like a Beach Boys song. Little Honda. 60 is the Marquettes, another one of those instrumental surf rock bands. Did the theme song to The Outer Limits, and so apparently that charted. 57, Baby, I need your lovin', got to have all your lovin'. I don't remember if that's a real Motown song. Like I said, there's so many generic Motown copycat bands. 55 is the Beatles again. I Want to Know a Secret. It's not one of my favorite Beatles songs. 53 is Shangri-La's again with the song that I do love, Remember Walking in the Sand. Obviously, I knew that song more as an Aerosmith song, but they use that sped up, and it's a famous TikTok thing too. So I'm sure they don't get paid for that, but oh, I love that song. 52, The Beatles, Can't Buy Me Love. 51 was The Girl from Ipanema. Oh, what a good song. The epitome of that bossa nova style. 49, Don't Let the Sun Catch You Crying. I think that's a Jerry and the Pacemaker song. In the research I found a version of Jeff Buckley doing it just offhand, and it's on my list of songs to cover because I never knew about that song and just discovered it. It's an awesome song. 48, Jan and Dean, Little Old Lady from Pasadena. And if anybody's going to copy that Beach Boys style, Jan and Dean should be the ones to do it. 46 is My Boy Lollipop. Ba-da-ba. Makes my heart go giddy up. I think of that as a novelty song. Kind of sort of just a bubblegum song. Kind of it's anachronistic for this time, so that's why I think of it as a novelty song. Kind of pastiche of earlier, I think of movie songs or whatever. But My Dirty Mind, I kind of put a little suggestive tone on those lyrics. My Boy Lollipop. Sorry, that's not for the kids, but 45, Bits and Pieces, more Dave Clark 5. 44 is It's in His Kiss. It's in His Kiss. That I should have wrote down more of the actual artist, because like I just thought, that's Motown. Let's just leave it at that. 43, there's another one of them Beach Boys copycat songs that I was talking about. Hey Little Cobra. So you got Little Honda and Hey Little Cobra. 41 is Johnny Rivers' cover of the Chuck Berry song Memphis. That's awesome. Johnny Rivers got famous by doing covers of other songs, but then other people got famous by covering his originals. He never really had a lot of hits with his originals, but it's kind of a weird situation. But he was kind of the house band in those early years at the Whiskey A Go Go. And his big album is Live at the Whiskey A Go Go. 40 is the Beatles with Twist and Shout. That one's obviously been way overplayed in the Ferris Bueller movie and every other movie. 39 is the other Beach Boys copycat, GTO. I'm surprised they didn't call it Little GTO. 38, The Animals, House of the Rising Sun. I'm getting a little sick of that song because every band or singer on the planet covers it. That Eric Grenvall, that was the singer of Skid Row and then quit, just did a cover of it. And I even have a cover of it. Everybody does that song, but nobody does it like the Animals. I almost said like the original. It's actually an old standard, obviously from 100 years ago, but nobody captures the emotion like Eric Burdon singing it. 37, Dionne Warwick, Walk On By. I talked about that one earlier. 36 is Leslie Gore's You Don't Own Me. Oh, what a good song. 35 is Dusty Springfield, wishing and hoping and praying and saying, oh, so good. 33 is more Motown. Baby love, my baby love. I think that one actually is the Supremes. 29 is Jay and the Americans, and come a little bit closer. You wouldn't be able to distinguish that from any of those British wave bands, but that's a great song. Come a little bit closer. Do, 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 do. I thought that song was a lot later than that, but what have you. 28, another Jan and Dean, Dead Man's Curve. And the obvious fun fact to that one is the story that they tell of the death songs or something. That's what they're called. I can't remember. But the story they tell was actually paralleled a year or two later when one of them, Jan or Dean, they have an argument in the movie High Fidelity of which one it was that died. But one of them actually died in the way that they describe in that movie, in the place that they're talking about, a Dead Man's Curve. 26 is a song called Bread and Butter. You may not think you know that song, but I'm sure you've heard it because it's got that high falsetto thing. Kind of copying the Frankie Valli style where he goes, I like bread and butter. I like toast and jam. Obviously, I can't do it near as high as that guy does in that song, but it's a little annoying. Not my favorite. Speaking of which, number 25 is Frankie Valli in the Four Seasons with Don't Go Away From Me. And more Frankie Valli at 24 with Ragdoll. 23, more Dave Clark 5, Glad All Over. 22 is a song called Suspicion. Suspicion. 21 is going to the chapel and we're gonna get married. 20 is under the boardwalk down on the soda. Obviously I don't know lyrics. 19 is a song by the Ray Charles Singers. And that one always freaked me out because that is not the Ray Charles that we all know and love. Apparently there was some white guy with some terrible white people choir music that Ray Charles Singers. Oh, it's awful. Don't ever fall for the Ray Charles Singers because it's not Ray Charles. 17 is Martha. Is it Martha and the Vandellas? See, that one I don't call the Supremes. I know that's the Martha and the Vandellas is Dancing in the Streets. Obviously covered by Van Halen and Mick Jagger and David Bowie. Mick Jagger and David Bowie for Live Aid. 16, Beatles, Please Please Me. Oh yeah, like I please you. 15 is Do What Diddy. Not Kid Rock. That's Ba With Da Ba Da Bang A Dang Diddy Diddy. And not P. Diddy. It's Manfred Mann's Earth Band with Do-a-diddy diddy dum diddy do, which is the highest British Invasion song on this list besides the Beatles. And yeah, besides the Beatles. 14 is the Beatles, Love Me Do, their very first single. Doesn't even have Ringo playing drums on it. He's playing tambourine. John Lennon is playing harmonica. And I barely even call that a Beatles song. 13 is A Hard Day's Night. Now that one is a hardcore Beatles song. That's a freaking great song. Hard Day's Night. The title track from their first movie, which came out this year. Number 12 is another one of those jazzy orchestra guys. Al Hirt had a song. 11 is Barbra Streisand with a song called People. I don't know that one. 10, Where Did Our Love Go? That's definitely the Supremes, right? Number 9 is the original of Last Kiss, and it is far superior to the terrible Pearl Jam version of it. I hated that song when I first heard it by Pearl Jam, and then I heard the original. I was like, oh, I hate this song. And I listened to it and I was like, that's kind of a decent song when Eddie Vedder isn't warbling through the whole thing. Number 8 is surprising because I can't believe a song got all the way to number 8 and then in 60 years has fallen completely out of the zeitgeist. I didn't even recognize it when I listened to it. It's by an artist called Gail Garnett, and it's a song called Well, Sing in the Sunshine, and just perplexed me. If you've heard of this song, tell me in the comments if you've ever heard of this song. Number 7 is My Guy, which is Motown, I think, but definitely not the Supremes. Number 6 is Dean Martin. I'm surprised that a crooner got this high in the year that the kids had started listening to all of the rock and roll and stuff, but apparently parents were still buying records. But everybody loves somebody sometime. That's a great song. Number 5 is the Beach Boys, I Get Around. The only Beach Boys song that made the top 100 that year, even though there was 3 or 4 Beach Boys copycats. It's amazing. Number 4, Roy Orbison, Pretty Woman, of course. What a great song. Another one covered by Van Halen and David Lee Roth. Number 3 is another kind of jazzy crooner one, surprisingly. Louis Armstrong with Hello Dolly. And there's a funny story about that when Louis Armstrong was on tour right about that time. And apparently what a lot of those jazz guys would do is go into the studio and just knock out a dozen, 2 dozen songs in an afternoon or in a couple of days. And then they were sparsed out for different things by the record label. And that one became part of a big hit Broadway thing, maybe. Was it Broadway? I think maybe, was it a movie too? But I don't know. But got to be a huge hit. And people was starting to request it at shows. They would come up to Louis Armstrong and go, hey, play Hello Dolly. It's your big song. And they didn't even remember it. They're like, what is this thing that they keep asking for? Like, and they had to go and buy the record to relearn it because they just knocked it out in an afternoon amongst a dozen other songs. Kind of funny. Number 2. Surprise, the Beatles with She Loves You, Yeah, Yeah, Yeah. And number 1 is the Beatles, I Want to Hold Your Hand. So, there you go. There's a speed run through all of the big songs from 1964. Tell me in the comments below if you prefer the British Invasion stuff, if there's a band you like more than the Beatles. Obviously, I know there's a lot of people that have a backlash to the Beatles now. They're still amazing. Obviously, this early phase was when they were in their pop phase and they hadn't become as amazing as they would become. If they would have stopped at this point, they would have been a big flash in the pan. It would have been like all of those other British invasion bands that just kind of came and went, but obviously that's not what happened. But tell me which one of these styles you like the best. The Beatles British invasion stuff, the Beach Boys stuff, the Frankie Valli stuff, the crooner stuff, the Motown stuff. I don't know. Tell me, let's talk about it. All right, I won't keep you too long. Catch you on the next one.